Hi, everybody, and welcome to Parenting Beyond Punishment's webinars. Today's webinar is Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, Even If You Weren't One, with Sheena Hill of Parenting Works. I want to invite you to participate today in the chat box to your right. You can chat with each other, you can make comments, and then if you click on the box with the question mark, you can ask us questions. We will respond to those questions as we're able to, and somewhat throughout the webinar today. I also want to let you know that there is about a 10 to 15 second delay in the video, so just be patient with us. If you notice that your video is catching or glitching, you can refresh your browser and that will usually take care of the situation. You can also go up at the very top of your screen, there's a place to adjust your bandwidth. And if you turn it to medium, that often fixes the problem as well. So my name is Amy Bryant of Parenting Beyond Punishment and Wild Child Counseling. I am a licensed and board certified mental health counselor, a child advocate, and an educator. And I founded Parenting Beyond Punishment as an online resource for people who want to learn how to guide children and set boundaries and step out of those power struggles without using spanking and yelling and other punishments that are really about controlling children. I provide counseling and parenting consultations and workshops here in the Atlanta area, and I also provide webinars and parenting consultations online. And today I'm really excited to have Sheena Hill with us here from Parenting Works, and she's going to talk to us about raising an emotionally intelligent child. Hi, Sheena.
Hi, thanks for joining us today, Amy. Thank you so much for all your hard work putting the webinar together and for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about you too, because you have such a great bio. Sheena, you do. I just love it. Sheena is a homeschooling mom and child advocate with over 10 years of experience as a certified parent education specialist. As a social worker, she counseled families in the nonprofit world for 8 years before going into private practice. As founder and director of Parenting Works, Sheena educates and empowers parents through group and private workshops, as well as individual parent counseling and coaching. She designs and facilitates classes focused on gentle discipline, healthy communication, and emotional intelligence. Through classes and private sessions, Sheena supports and inspires parents to reach their full parenting potential by enabling them to be more responsive, respectful, and consistent in their practices. Aside from her ability to compose silly songs, both entertaining and annoying her daughter, her superpowers are helping families enhance their relationships and mitigate power struggles. She has never met an ice cream she didn't like and lives in Maryland with her growing family. You can learn more about Sheena's dynamic work on Facebook at /parentingworks and at her website, parentingworks.weebly.com. Thank you so much for being here today, Sheena.
Thank you. So I want to go ahead and just jump right in, but if people have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, as Amy said, and we will try to get those answered throughout so we can stay on top of those. So I was telling Amy when we opened this that usually when I teach this class in person, I try to make it really interactive and ask people how they're feeling, because that's usually something that we don't often talk about honestly. And so even though you guys can't tell me specifically how you're feeling, I can tell you I'm feeling pretty nervous right now. This is my first live webinar, and it's a new venue for me, so I want to be really transparent about that feeling because it's important. It informs the work that we do, and I don't need to pretend to be something that I'm not here. I can just be really honest with everybody about how I'm feeling. And that being said, we're just going to jump right in and try to get you guys as much information in the next hour as we can. But hopefully everybody's feeling excited and ready to gain some knowledge and some skills. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, really what we're talking about is the skill set that enables us to recognize, understand, label, express, and manage the full range of emotions. So that's not just the happy, positive emotions, but also the sort of scary, what we would consider negative emotions, like anger and sadness and fear. And not only to understand and express those within ourselves, but also in other people in our lives. And, I'm sure everybody is aware of why emotional intelligence is so important, because it's sort of the big buzzword going around the internet these days. But I just like to reinforce why it matters so much to have high emotional intelligence skills. And the reason that it matters is for our own self-control, and also so that we are able to have effective communication and really healthy relationships. Even our relationships with our children are based on our ability to be vulnerable and honest about where we are in our lives, in a developmentally appropriate context, right? So I really like to stress that emotional intelligence sort of colors everything that we do and every relationship we have, whether it be with our children, our partners, our bosses, our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors, even strangers online. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're really talking about that ability to think about our interactions through the lens of an emotional understanding. Because, especially with our children, but even with adults, any behavior that people present is linked to a feeling or a need. And, we can't always understand or control what's going on in our brains, but or our bodies, certainly, right? Our emotions are felt in both our brains and our bodies, but we can control how we respond to those emotional triggers and experiences. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're really talking about learning to respond instead of react to all the stimuli in our environment. And we all can agree that parenting is very triggering for a lot of us, especially if we weren't raised as emotionally intelligent people. And I, I can't speak for everybody, but certainly for myself and my peers, our generation, we weren't really encouraged to share our emotions, especially the full range of emotions. A great example of this is, when my daughter was smaller and she would cry, it made my mom so uncomfortable to see her cry. And she would immediately say, shh, 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 don't cry. What, how can I make you feel better? Do you want this candy to make you feel better? Do you want this toy to make you feel better? Can you watch this TV show to make you feel better? And her response was so shocking to me because I was able to recognize, seeing it, in applied to somebody else, how uncomfortable she was with real emotion and how she just wanted to mask and diminish and sort of dismiss emotion as much as possible instead of allowing that emotion to just take place. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, especially in our own homes with our children, if we weren't able to have that in our homes growing up in our own childhoods, it can be pretty tricky to figure out how do I apply this idea, this skill set that I think is important, that I know is important, but how can I apply it in my everyday life and really make it a reality? And the first thing that I always tell parents when I talk to them about emotional intelligence is to really make your home a safe space for all emotions, for the full range of emotions, and to allow emotions to be honored guests in your home. And that is not always easy to do. If your child is saying to you, I'm mad at you, I don't like this choice that you're making for me, or I don't like this boundary that you're setting for me, it can really trigger us, and we can have a reaction instead of responding to their reality and their truth. Because when we think about it from their perspective, we can realize, I wouldn't like somebody to set that boundary for me. I wouldn't like somebody to make that choice for me. But it does require a mental shift, and it can be hard for people to make that jump. I was doing this class a few months ago, and one of the parents said to me, "It seems like I'm talking about emotions all the time." And I said, "Then you're doing it right." If you are talking about your emotions and your child's emotions and the emotions of characters in books that they're reading and shows and movies that they're watching and their friends, then that is really how you create a space in your home where emotions are honored guests. Because you're really saying it's okay to talk about emotions, and it's okay to be raw and real with each other. And obviously, that's very easy to do with the positive emotions, but it's a lot harder to do with what we consider sort of the negative emotions, and some of the more abstract emotions that are especially harder for kids to name and put their finger on and to articulate. Especially for our youngest kids who are not as verbal, or for our kids that don't quite have complete mastery of emotional intelligence. So one way that we can really create a safe space in our home and honor those emotions, certainly I've been talking a lot about it here, is naming emotions and not being afraid to be wrong when you label an emotion. If your child is having a difficult time with a game or a toy, it's okay to engage them in that conversation and say, it seems like you're frustrated. Even if they're not frustrated, they might be tired, or they might be angry, or they might be scared that they can't play with that toy the way that they want to. But it's okay to guess and to be willing to be wrong when you are labeling those emotions, both with our kids and with ourselves. Sometimes we think we can put our finger on what we're feeling, and then later we think about it, or we have a little bit of quiet time, or something just clicks in us, and we realize that's not what I was feeling at all. I actually feel something deeper or something completely different. And so, this, like all parenting, is not about perfection. It's about working towards gaining more skills. And that's one of the questions I think that parents ask me most. Do I have to have mastery of emotional intelligence in order to teach my children? And I always tell them, absolutely not. As long as you are working on it, as long as you are committed, you don't have to be an expert, and you don't have to be fully in control. I'm sure everybody has been feeling better and, having some support all month with the No Spank Challenge, that we all lose it. We all make mistakes. We all have bad days. It doesn't mean that you're not an emotionally intelligent person just because you are not able to control yourself 100% of the time. It means that you are human, and sometimes your emotions overtake you, and that's okay. It's actually a great teaching moment for our kids to say, look, I had a bad moment too, and that doesn't make me a bad person. It's just an opportunity to try again and continue to hone my skills and continue to practice. We're going to talk a lot about practice here today, because emotional intelligence is something that needs practice and patience and support to be learned and to be really put into action, especially in those crisis moments when you need it most. It's not something that we just sort of learn by osmosis as we're going through our relationships. Many of us get to our 30s and 40s and we have relationships where we don't have emotional intelligence, especially if we're dealing with other people that don't have high emotional intelligence, sort of feeds off of each other. So it's important to remember that that's just not something that we learn just by naturally interacting with others. It's possible that in some evolutionary context that was the case when we lived in smaller communities and people were much more connected. But certainly the way that our fast-paced society is working now, it's just not something that you learn by osmosis. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm an emotionally intelligent person.
Wouldn't it be so nice if we could just read a book and be like, I've got it. I've got it.
Yes, that would be nice. I agree. Especially for parenting,
Yeah.
because our kids are such triggers for all of the somatic memories from our own childhoods that we've stored in our bodies, and we might not even know are there. We might not even know what our triggers are.
Boy, they will show us. If
Oh,
ever you wanted a
absolutely.
growth experience, it is seeing that, right? Yeah.
And it's a beautiful gift, even though it can be stressful and frustrating. It's really nice to have that opportunity to grow and get out of our comfort zone.
And to see where we need to grow. Absolutely.
So, when we talk about creating a safe space and providing that scaffolding, that support for our children to build their emotional intelligence skills, we're really talking about sharing how we feel, talking about how we feel, and being, as I said earlier, appropriately honest about that. I wouldn't tell your 5-year-old, I'm worried that daddy is cheating on me. But I would tell your 5-year-old, I'm stressed out. I have a big project at work and I'm worried about getting all the work done, or I'm worried about keeping my boss happy. It's okay to be really honest with our kids about some of the feelings that we have, because that opens the door for them to be honest with us about the big feelings that they have. One of the most powerful things I learned when I was in grad school to become a social worker is that in a clinical setting, in therapy, and I think it applies very much to our children, we want to let them know that their big feelings don't scare us. That whatever they bring to us, we can help them hold. Even if we don't have all the answers, even if we don't know how to solve the problem, or we, really are shocked or surprised, we can help them hold that feeling. Because if it's scary for us, imagine how scary it is for them. And they need our support. They need to know that even if something is scary, even if something is hard, there are ways to get help and there are ways to get support. And, we hopefully as adults have people that we can get support from. We can have people that help hold those scary things for us. And that's one of our primary jobs as parents, is to help hold that space for our children. One of the things that I talk about a lot when I, discuss this with parents is really being a witness to our child's emotions. We don't have to solve the problem. We don't have to make them feel better. We don't have to take the emotion away. We just need to really be present with them and let them know, I recognize that you're having a big feeling right now. I recognize that it might be hard for you, and I want you to know that I am here for you, and you can share as little or as much as you want about the big feeling that you're having or about the experience that you're having. But whatever you're comfortable sharing, I want to listen to. And I'm really here to support you. Sometimes that means holding our kids while they're crying. Sometimes that means patiently waiting for them to finish their tantrum so that they can come and get support. Sometimes it means waiting for them to ask for a hug. Sometimes it means asking them, would you like a hug? And it might look different with each child or with each relationship or with each scenario. Each person is not going to respond to each stressor the same way. And so it's really about being able to be flexible and go with the flow and just let them know whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're feeling, I'm here for you. And I'm going to I'm going to support you to the best of my ability. Um, Another thing that I talk about a lot with parents, not just sharing emotions and asking our kids about their emotions and being willing to take whatever answer they have, right? You might ask your child, how was school today? And they might say, terrible. And that's so hurtful to say, oh no, wait, what's going on? But we have to be willing to hear the good with the bad and to not rush to judgment or rush to problem solving and just really reflect back to them how we understand their experience and their emotional state. But a big part of that is being willing to not avoid, deny, or dismiss emotions. And I think, especially with children, that's one of the biggest challenges that our society has. Our society really wants to dismiss emotions. We tell children, you don't have anything to cry about. That's not a big deal. You shouldn't feel hurt that your friend left you out. You shouldn't feel hurt that you didn't get asked to the prom. You're fine, right? You're okay. We try to sort of impose this, concept of being okay and being strong on children and adults, right? We're so uncomfortable when our friend comes to us and is crying and stressed out and distraught. And, we do all of these things that are really roadblocks to communication, right? We try to assuage them. We say, oh, don't worry. I know your field trip was postponed because of rain. They'll reschedule it. Oh, you didn't make the team. You can try again next year. And even though we think we're being helpful because our intentions are to be helpful, we're actually shutting down communication and we're not allowing that space for our child to really be honest with themselves and feel their emotions. And so when we talk about creating that safe space, we're really talking about not dismissing or denying emotions. It's okay for people to cry. It's okay for people to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be scared. And it's okay to be happy, but we can't be happy all the time. We can't be excited all the time. Each emotion sort of has its place in our world. And when we really allow that full year of seasons, right, we can appreciate those positive emotions more because we know, wow, yesterday I was really feeling terrible and I was really feeling stressed out, and today I feel better. And it's actually a blessing. It's a gift. If we just felt great all the time, we probably wouldn't appreciate it so much. Something that I know we've talked about a lot online is, creating spaces in your home that are safe spaces for emotions. So I always encourage parents to create a peace corner or a quiet corner, just some little nook in your home. It doesn't have to be fancy, but a place that has a comfy place to sit and some, beautiful artwork or something that's meaningful to your family. A lot of people put a family portrait or a picture of nature. I know a lot of families that put a religious symbol, something that really ties into your values. And it's just a place where anybody, any family member, not just our kids, can go to be with their emotions. And they can go alone if they choose to, or they can go with us. And it's a wonderful tool to have in the home, so that our kids know, even when they're having a hard time, or we know even if we're having a hard time, that we can go to that space and just be real and be present in our emotions. And we don't have to even talk about them. We can just say, I need a breather. I'm going to go take myself to the quiet corner and sit down and take some deep breaths and relax and smell a beautiful candle or look out the window. It's nice to have it by a window so you could have that nature aspect, but not everybody has that ability. Amy, do you
Yes.
want to chat for a minute? I just need to run and get my plug, my computer.
Battery. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so
I
I'll be
will.
right back. Thank
Okay.
you.
Sure. I'm glad you noticed. So we have one question on here. I want to mention too, I think so. I'll click on myself. I think as parents, sometimes it can be really hard for us to sit with these emotions because we were not raised this way. And so we feel a lot of discomfort. And it takes some practice to get to a point where we can just sit with our discomfort, but that's a really big part of it. So we have a question in Sheena. I was just going to start with a question over on the side.
Oh, great.
Who said, so this person asks, what specific instructions, tools, concepts do you have that parents can act on concretely to help them gain competence in self-regulation, misbehavior, and socializing well with siblings and peers? And I think that that's a big part of what goes on with emotional intelligence, right? And a lot of it starts with modeling. So when I'm self-regulated with my child, so my child is having a tantrum or a meltdown, or she's shouting something at me because she's so angry or overwhelmed, my ability to self-regulate teaches her what it looks like to become self-regulated. And because we have these things in our brains called mirror neurons, my self-regulated brain is seen by her dysregulated brain, and she's then able to calm down, and of course not immediately, but over time. But Sheena, do you want to speak to that a little bit about sort of some concrete tools to, what does that look like? We know we want that, but
so I have sort of my box of tools here, so I can share a few of those with you guys. One of the best tools that is very very easy to have on hand are books about emotional intelligence in your home. And you could have them in your peace or quiet corner. You could have them in a separate section where they're easy to access, or you can just have them as part of your regular library. There are so many amazing books. This is actually one of my favorites, Have You Filled a Bucket Today? And there are a lot of books about how to deal with feeling angry, how to deal with specific emotions. This is a great one, The Way That I Feel. And just having books that talk about emotions directly really open up that dialogue, so that when you are calm, you can start talking about emotions, and then it's easier to introduce some of those concepts or reinforce some of those concepts in the moment of crisis, right? Because of the way that our brains work, we can't do any learning when we're in a heightened emotional state. And that's usually when parents try to instill these habits or try to practice these things. And it's just frustrating for everyone involved, because the brain's just not capable of rationalizing and making new choices and learning new skills in that state. So the emotional intelligence books just sort of open up that dialogue when everybody's calm and more receptive. But you don't have to go out and buy specific books on emotional intelligence in order to attain this. You could use any book that you have. But when you're reading the book with your child, just take a moment to stop and discuss the emotions of the characters in the book. And this also works with TV and movies. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to pause when you're doing, when you're reading together. But even if the character in the book is not specifically mentioning their emotion, you can ask your child, how do you think the character feels? Look at the picture, look at their facial expressions. You can ask your child, how would you feel in that situation? And you can also share how you would feel, right? Oh, Sarah was left out of the birthday party. I would feel really hurt if somebody didn't invite me to their birthday party. And so you can use everyday objects or everyday teachable moments to start those dialogues. Another great tool, where is it? There it is, are these feelings flashcards. Now I have a couple. This is one of my favorites. This one's by Todd Parr, who's a pretty famous children's author. And you can get these on Amazon. They are just beautifully illustrated. They're very bright. They have, kid-friendly pictures. And what I like about them is that they have the opposite emotion on the reverse side. So they're less. What happened to my video here? Amy, can you see me?
I can see you and hear you.
Okay, great. I can't see myself, so I don't know what that's all about. You can see me. That's all that matters.
Okay. We may have just lost you. Can you still hear me? Do you want to try maybe refreshing your browser? So if you're on live and you can still hear me, could someone post in the chat? I just want to make sure. And I'm going to keep talking just in case, and hopefully Sheena will be able to rejoin us in just a minute. So, a lot of what we're talking about here is being proactive as a parent when it comes to gaining emotional intelligence skills. And a part of this is going to be having these daily conversations. So your child has a meltdown, or their feelings have been hurt, or they're upset about something going on with a peer or at school or with a sibling. And what you're going to want to do, thank you, Natalie, is you're going to have these conversations when everybody's calm. And that's what Sheena was talking about, how when everyone's in a good place, you can sit down with your child and help them learn these emotionally and really listen and talk about it. Because what we've really learned is that with children, behavior is communication, which means that those things we so often call misbehavior is communication. And they're saying, help me. They're saying, I'm hurting, I'm having a hard time, I need your help. And so what we need to do then as parents, I don't like to use the word need, but our job then as parents is to go in and say, okay, what is my child trying to teach me right now in this moment? And what can I do to help? And that moment right there, when they're having that problem with their sibling, I'm going to go back to the example. When they're having that problem with their sibling and you're right there and you're reflecting back and forth what each of them is saying to them, and you're not telling them what to do. Let's say you have a toy and they're both arguing over this book, and you say, I'm going to hold this book here. You can't see that, sorry. I'm going to hold this book here and I'm going to help y'all work through this. And then, you ask them, you get really curious and you say, tell me what's going on. And you look to your one sibling and you say, you tell me. Okay, now I'm going to talk to your sibling. Now you tell me what's going on. And you listen to this sibling. And then you keep going back and forth with your hands on the toy. And you say, I have confidence in you to work this out. And this is helping them to be heard. It's helping them to learn to negotiate skills. And it might take 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, but the point is that they're both getting heard. And in that moment, they are learning and gaining emotional intelligence skills. So self-regulation, just like with parents, it's about practicing and practicing and practicing again and again. It's about having conversations when you're not in the moment so that they can learn those skills as we go. I know Sheena had some questions, and I'm sorry she's not here to talk more about it. But I think what I might do is pull up this emotional intelligence handout, which is located in the top of your chat section. And if y'all pulled that up, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. So, and then when she comes on, she can do that too. So she talks about building emotional intelligence skills, and this is both for yourself and for your child. So she says, we teach them to our child by modeling them, by reading stories and talking about them, and these things she said. And then by working with kids to overcome challenging situations, and then using discipline that really, you're going to set boundaries in such a way that they're learning emotional intelligence skills. So you're not just saying, you did X, Y, Z, so I'm going to send you to your room, but you're saying, you're having these really big feelings and I'm having these big feelings. And so we need to both calm down so that we can get to a place to talk. And then we need to own whatever's going on. We need to normalize emotions and keep them all welcome. And then so she says, building emotional intelligence skills is becoming aware of emotions. So we're aware of our own, we're aware of our children. We're recognizing the opportunities to connect with our children. We're listening and responding with empathy. We're helping our children name emotions. And we're using teachable moments to discuss emotions daily. And then finally, we're finding good solutions together. So thank you, yes. And if you guys want to post questions right now while we wait for Sheena, that would be really helpful for me since I didn't prepare anything. So Natalie says, when I do this with my kids, I often say, this is what I would do if they can't come up with anything. And so, yeah, I would say, I find that like 30 seconds feels almost like an eternity sometimes. So I might hold that toy or hold that space. Sometimes when I was teaching little kids, I would put my arms around them both and I wouldn't force them to stay, but just sort of holding that space for them. And I would try to count silently in my head or sing the ABCs in my head to really give them space to think. And then I would say, just like you had said, what do you think about someone taking a turn first? And then listen. And then how will we decide who gets to go first? And, sometimes the initial response is, oh, me, I'm going to go first. But I think children surprise us. I think oftentimes they will come up with these amazing solutions that are so far out of my own sort of paradigm of thinking, because I guess I'm not as creative as I used to be, that I just try to go with it. So they might say, what if we both swing our arms in circles and hold the book, and wherever the book lands, we'll use it. Sometimes you go with that, and you might have to navigate that space again with them. But things sometimes just work out. And if we can go with their solutions, that's always the best. But if you find that they're just stagnant, you can definitely offer some suggestions. My daughter, now she's in this stage right now where anything I suggest, she's like, no. And so I'm just, okay. I might suggest something off the wall just because I see that she's going to say no. It looks like Sheena's trying to sign in right now. Hi, Sheena. I can't hear you yet, but maybe try the, oops. Maybe try the buttons to your top. I can't find any of my buttons now. Oh, there they are. So, okay, so another person says, validating emotions is great, but after the 20th time, you need the child to find another emotion other than rage. Well, we can't really get our children to feel a different emotion. When they're really angry, they need the space to express that emotion. You don't have to keep validating it. You can just be there. And really, the less we talk and the more we listen, the more space they have to work out that emotion on their own. Because really, when we give children the space, they can work it out and they can get it out. Now, there's some ways that we can give them to work that out, especially rage, when those really big, strong anger, rage, frustration, overwhelm. We need to get up and move. Children need to get up and move. And we can model that, right? Like if I'm really angry, I do crazy stuff like fall on the floor and flop around like a fish. I mean, some of it's to make me laugh and some of it's to move and get that calming stress response. Robin Peters Bennett talks about this really important calming stress response. And so I want to encourage you to be proactive. If you know your child's rage is right there on the tip all the time, come up with some proactive solutions before that rage shows up and say, here's some things we can do. What do you want to try? Have them shoot their arms up into the air, have them jump up in the air, shoot some baskets, going something simple as going to get a glass of water, anything like that, where you start to get some movement, get those feet pounding on the ground to get some of that sort of trapped energy out, is really helpful for transitioning from rage into a release of rage so that they can begin to sort of operate and be in their higher intelligence thinking. Sheena, how are you doing with your... I still can't. I'm wondering about... It's okay. Don't panic. It's okay. So what about... I know. I'm frustrated for you. What about you tried the settings, and then when we were on earlier, I can't remember what you did. Did you...
My mic?
That's it.
Okay, great. Okay.
That's it.
Excellent.
Thank you. Perfect
Yay.
timing.
Okay, good. I'm back. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties.
It's okay. Thank you, everybody, for hanging there in there with us.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not sure what you guys were able to see before I lost all power. I don't know what happened here on my end. But some tools that are great for kids are using the emotion cards. And I have these by Todd Parr, and I also have these that I got from the teacher store, which are a little bit older kids, also feeling a wide range of emotions. And there are a lot of games that you can play with these emotion cards. One of my favorite games to play is sort of a storytelling game, and you can lead or you can do it collaboratively. The example that I gave earlier, which I'm not sure if you guys were able to see or not, so Amy, stop me if you guys already saw this, but I said, Adam was feeling brave that he got a new cape and it made him feel really powerful and he wanted to go show it off to his friends. So when he got to school, everybody was looking at his cape and admiring his cape, and he felt really included. But then he felt frightened because his friend Daniel wanted to borrow his cape and wear it. And Adam really didn't want to share his new cape with his friends. So that's a game that you can play with your child interactively, collaboratively, where you tell a story together with the different emotions. Another great game to play, you guys can really admire my artistic abilities here. I just used some plates to make some basic emotions. And you can use the plates to make duplicates of these emotion faces, and you can play a variety of games either with the cards or with these emotion plates. You can certainly do sort of like a flashcard game where you hold up the plate and talk about the emotion and talk about things that would help you, that would cause you to feel that emotion. You can do a matching game if you have duplicates, especially of the plates. And that is really fun for kids because kids love memory games. And you can do role playing. You can, it's sort of like the storytelling, but you can role play together. Another great tool for parents to have on hand, especially talking about emotions, are puppets. You would be amazed how a child who's not interested in really telling you how they feel, you put a puppet or even a sock on your hand and you talk to them, especially young children, right? If I did this with my 11-year-old, she probably would roll her eyes. But if I did it with a younger child, they would just open up and start sharing all their deepest, darkest dreams and feelings with that puppet. And so that's a great tool for parents to have on hand. And these are things that you can make, right? You don't have to go out and buy the fancy emotion cards or buy fancy puppets. You can make the face plates, or make you can put them on popsicle sticks and make sort of masks out of them, and you can make puppets out of old socks. And it's really something that you guys can do together. So you can say, this is a tool that we want to add, this is a toy that we want to add to our playroom, and I want you to help me. Let's think of some emotions. What emotions would you like to include on the plates? And having kids draw them or even work them out with you. These are great things for parents to have on hand. So again, we're talking about these emotion games when kids are calm and receptive.
I want to just tell you a quick story, Sheena.
Yeah.
So I'm always literally shocked at how responsive my daughter is to a hand, even just a hand puppet. And she was having a really hard time one day, and maybe I was too, I'm not sure, but I just literally put my hand up, and she loves social stories too, which I'll talk about, but I literally just put my hand up, and it was like it wasn't me. She was like looking at this puppet and talking, and I was speechless, except of course I wasn't speechless. And it was the most, this isn't my favorite word. It was amazingly precious, but to hear her open up to something that wasn't me while I was there was so powerful, just to see her be able to sort of unload what was going on. And it was this really hard time for her. So if you don't have anything else and you can just start talking to her or him and the puppet, and your hand puppet, it is a powerful tool. I'm so glad you brought that up. And someone asked some other ones. I found these in our garage the other day. These are really great too. These are they're sort of a thing there. Facial expressions, and those can be really nice to work with children.
Another tool that I love, which are more for older kids. These books are really for kids that are 7 to 12. But there are some really amazing emotional intelligence workbooks for older kids, and they're beautifully done. They have, lots of white space and pictures, and it's something that your child can work through with your support or independently, if that's something that's more comfortable for them, to try to figure out how they can have more control over their emotions. So there's some great ones I have: what to do when your temper flares, what to do when you worry too much, what to do when you grumble too much. And there are a couple of other ones. And so, these are great things to have on hand, just so that we can start to get the ball rolling to talk about emotions. I know Amy was mentioning earlier about getting kids to stomp and be really physically active. And that's so important because, our species used to be a lot more active than we are now. And so I think we were able to discharge a lot of that excess emotion because we walked places and we farmed more and we just had a more active lifestyle. Now our kids sit in classrooms all day, and a lot of their activities happen inside or in really structured environments. And so having those physical activities are really important. One of my favorites is the balloon. I'm not sure if I can show you here. Let's see if I can do it. So this one, ooh, there we go. Okay, so I love to teach this to parents who have toddlers and preschoolers, and you would be amazed how effective it is and how receptive small children are to using this on their own. You basically ask them to blow themselves up like a big balloon and then release that air and let the air out of the balloon. And if I wasn't here on the camera, I would be, releasing the air all the way to the floor, which always makes my students laugh when I do it in a classroom setting. But it's a great tool, and there are a couple different variations of that. But it's a great tool to be able to have some of that more physical discharge and physical expression.
Can I ask? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh,
I thought I might ask a question from the group, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's great. I see a lot of questions are popping up. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to look two places at once.
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
I'll just interrupt, and if you want to keep going, just say, I'm going to keep going. So Oana asks, how can we teach children to accept that it is okay to feel sad or angry if they are not always first, or like if they are not winning? So how is it okay just to go ahead and feel sad or to feel angry?
I think just, being really honest and verbalizing that and letting them know with your words and your actions that it is okay, and letting them know, if you need a hug, I'm here for you. If you want to sit there and just feel sad, you're welcome to do that. It is really hard to wait. And it is really hard to be patient and to not get what you want and to not get what you want right away. We feel that as adults, right? And so I think just acknowledging the feeling and creating a space for that.
Like, how would that look with your daughter? Because I know Oana, I know Oana, she has older children too. And, it's like, it's still such like that big, like, even at those older ages. I think sometimes just sitting with it, it's hard for me to sit with those emotions.
Absolutely. And, with my daughter, I would let her know I see what you're feeling, and there's nothing I can do about it right now. You have to wait while I take care of the baby, or you have to wait for your turn, in gymnastics class or whatever the case may be. And it's okay to feel that, I think what's uncomfortable for the child, or even for us as adults, is the sensory experience in our body, because it feels like this feeling will never stop. I will feel this way forever. I don't know how to control it. I don't know how to make it go away. And just letting them know it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. So being really verbal about that.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I see that there are some more questions. Should we answer some more questions?
Well, let me ask you, how much do you want to go through? And do we want to save some of these questions to the end, or do you want to go ahead and answer some?
let's go ahead and answer some because I know we had some
Okay.
technical difficulties. So um, you know, I'm here, I'm yours. So
Okay.
let's get it done.
All right. So Rachel asks, how important do you think it is to get the other people in your child's life on board with these skills or tools? In the example with your mother that you gave earlier, would you try to train a grandparent or just hope that your own efforts towards your child's EQ will be enough?
You know, Rachel, that's such an important question. And obviously, the more people in our child's lives, you know, in our life that have emotional intelligence skills, or at least that are working towards mastery of those skills, the better. Because, you know, we can't always be around when our kids are with their grandparents, nor should we be. That is an opportunity for them to develop their own unique personal relationship with other people that we trust and that they trust, which is a huge part of resilience, right? Having lots of adults that they can go to if they need support and if they have questions or problems. So I think one of the most important things is to get people on board, especially people that are going to be spending a lot of time with your children, or babysitting them, or keeping them for weekends or for summers. And that includes our partners, right? Sometimes we are really gung-ho about emotional intelligence, and our partners are not so sure. It's not something they're used to or they're comfortable with. So I think, you know, instead of trying to train them, to use the word that Rachel used, I would just be really honest and communicative about sharing your journey and your experiences. Certainly being a model goes a long way, and that's really important. You should model that. But especially with another adult, you can have an open dialogue about that and have a conversation and say, look, these are some skills that I'm working on. These are some ways that it is, you know, impacting my life and my child's life, and it's really important to me that you be my partner in this journey. And you know, I want to help you to work on these skills also. Especially grandparents might not always be receptive, so that's something that we have to be open to. But I think discussing our goals and values and really being committed to emotional intelligence goes a long way. So we can be willing to be vulnerable with them and trust in those relationships, and you know, really label emotions with them, right?
Right.
And do some of that same work, which is hard. I do plenty of that with my own mom, and it's taken her a long time. You know, my daughter's 11 years old. It's taken her a long time to get on board with that, but she really is getting on board with that now, and it makes a big difference.
And I think that grandparents too begin to see the value, especially when they start to experience you allowing them to have their own emotions.
Exactly. And especially, I think, you know, for my mom is 63. So for her generation, kids were not allowed to have
Hmm.
negative emotions, and they were not allowed to express those things to their parents. And so
Hmm.
it's just a whole different worldview.
Yes.
And it's not that they're necessarily opposed, it's just maybe something that they haven't been exposed to. So giving them that safe space to be honest about their emotions, and to label them and to try to manage them. And you know, giving feedback, right? We
Yeah.
talk a lot about the brain. Every time we talk about child development and discipline and emotional intelligence, you know, I feel like I talk about the brain all day long. Um, so so part of how learning occurs is with feedback, right? So being able to have those conversations and have that feedback with grandparents is really crucial.
Hmm. So,
I see a question, Amy, that I think is important.
okay.
Julie asks, we have the temper book, but it makes my son mad. He won't look at or work through it with us or on his own. What then? And that's a great question, because you know, I can tell Julie she's trying to do what, you know, whatever is necessary, whatever she can do to help her son through his emotions, and he's resistant to it, and that obviously can be a trigger for us as parents. You know, I'm trying to help you. Why won't you let me help you? So I think that the best thing to do would be to say, if my child is not receptive to this, then it's not the tool for them. And not every tool is going to be a good fit for every person or every temperament or every child or even where they are developmentally. Maybe Julie can put that book on her shelf and keep it, for 6 months or a year and try to come back to it later and see if her son is more receptive. But for now, if he's really against it, there's no use getting into a power struggle and starting a battle unnecessarily just to try to give him the tools. It might mean thinking outside of the box and saying, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. What else can we do? And I would really get him involved. I would sit down, at the dinner table or go for a walk in the park or something when he's calm and he's not in a, crisis state, he's not mad, and talking to him, even if he's 4 or 5 years old, right? Talking to him and saying, look, it seems like you've been having some hard time, a hard time with getting mad lately. I've noticed that when you get mad, you kick the cat or you punch the wall or you say hurtful things to your sibling or you pinch the baby. And it's not working for me, and I don't think it's working for you. What do you think we can do? What would make it easier for you to deal with those mad emotions? And he might say, I want to do a mad dance. And you say, okay, what would that look like? What does the mad dance look like? But really opening up that dialogue to include our children so that we're problem solving together and we're brainstorming together. And I think it's always amazing how insightful they are about what they need and what would help them. And just being flexible, right? He might say, I want to do a mad dance. And you say, okay, let's try it. And then the next time he's mad, that doesn't work for him. And you say, okay, well, let's try something else, right? We're not married to any solutions. I think the biggest tool about being a parent is being creative and just trying new things and seeing what works. And something that works this week might not work next week, but really figuring out what are the best ways to reach our kids. Oh, Julie's son is 9. So yeah, I think you still have time to use that book, Julie, and come back to it. Just put it on the shelf, remember it, and then try to find some other things. And certainly at 9 years old, I bet that your son has a lot of ideas about what might help him. And even if he doesn't, just asking him and really showing that respect can help that dialogue and help the brainstorm. And you can make some suggestions and he might veto them all. And then you say, okay, well, let's keep talking about it. Let's keep figuring out what we can come up with. And it might be that he wants to scribble on a piece of paper and tear it up when he's mad. There are so many ways to deal with those big emotions. But also, at 9, biology is at play, right? He might not be able to have some of the self-control because those hormones are starting to get him geared up. And I know it is shocking how quickly those hormones come into play in those, late childhood, early preteen years. And it's so hard. But I think that's a good place to start is having a conversation with him and seeing what he thinks he needs to deal with those emotions. Amy, are there other questions?
There is. This attendant asks, she says, grandparents tell my child when he is crying on the floor that he is too old to do that and he needs to stop. They tell me I need to stop spoiling him. What do I do in these situations? My son is 5 years old, and crying is actually a good way of expressing his emotions for my son because there are situations when he hits everybody.
Yeah, I can understand your frustration, Elizaveta, about your parents, telling you that he's spoiled, or certainly telling him that he's too old to be crying. I would have a really honest conversation with them, both with him present and without him present, about child development and about how important it is for him to cry and to express those emotions. And if you're present, when they're telling him to stop, I would advocate for your child, right there with them. And you can say, wow, that might be how you guys were raised, but actually it is good for him to cry. He's not too old to cry. Yesterday I stubbed my toe and I cried.
Yes.
And so really being the voice for him with them, because he can't stand up for himself, especially when he's in a compromised emotional state, and just really reinforcing to them that that is not something that you want to teach him. And I know the spoiled word, right, is kryptonite. Everybody throws it around and just wants to, use it as a catch-all. And it it it's sort of been warped and manipulated. It doesn't mean what most people think it means.
Yes.
And so I would just really, try to have honest conversations with them about how you're helping him to gain a skill set that will help him for the rest of his life. And if he doesn't have opportunities to cry and release those emotions and be real and honest now, it's going to affect him in all of his relationships, every single one later in life. And you can be honest with them and press them and say, do you want him to have healthy friendships? Do you want him to have healthy partnerships? Do you want him to be able to go to school and handle maybe performing poorly on a test or being left out with his friends? And they're going to tell you yes, hopefully, right? I'm sure that they want the best for your son. And so reminding them that the building blocks for those healthy relationships and that effective communication and those life skills really happen now, and that it's a process. He's not going to have complete control over himself when he's 5 years old, but if they are patient with you and patient with him, that they will start to see progress, and they will see that he can grow and build that skill set over time.
Advocating for our children is so important. And it takes a lot of emotional intelligence, right?
It sure does, because I'm sure that Elizaveta feels triggered, right, when the grandparents are saying that, because especially when someone is telling us we're spoiling our children, it makes us feel defensive, right? We feel like, wait, I'm doing what's best for my children, and who are you to question what I'm doing, because I'm really just trying to do the right thing. And so being aware of our own triggers and being really self-aware about our emotions, that really makes a big difference. I see that there are lots of questions. I'm here as long as you want to stay. So I see we're past the hour, but whatever you want to do, Amy, you're the boss applesauce.
Well, there's one more question that we haven't gotten to. I just want to say that you can watch the rest of this later. If you do need to go, there will be I'm going to type that in here. Apparently I can't do more than one thing at a time. So you can watch this later. So Sheena, okay, we have one more question in here, and then maybe if you have something else you want to talk about that you didn't quite get to, we could continue that as well. I have about 20 more minutes.
Okay, perfect.
So I'll read this. So what do you have to say about limiting digital as a way to encourage self-regulation by not modeling that the child can constantly have external stimulation?
That's such an important question. I think, our digital lives really do encourage us to be sort of instant gratification focused. And I think limiting digital is good for all of us, not just kids. It's, it's good for us as adults too. In my family, we have 24 hours every week where we have no Facebook and no phones. And it's hard. It's really hard, but it's so important. And so I think the first step in asking kids to limit their digital, time is by modeling that. Having time where you plug in your phone at night and you say, I'm done with my phone, unless it's a work emergency or obviously something pressing. To say, we're done with that. And dinner time is a great time to do that, so that everybody can sit around. And if your family is super busy in the evening and you're running to soccer and you're running to Boy Scouts and you're doing all these things, maybe breakfast time is the time for no digital. Or maybe, some other time where you are together, even if you're not all together as a family, if it's just you and your child, and your other child is at an activity, or your partner is doing something, just really being conscientious and being on top of what you're modeling, because I do think that there's a lot of pressure to have that external stimulation all the time. But the more that we can model that, the easier it is to set that expectation and that boundary for our children. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think boredom is important because it's part of sitting with that discomfort that we feel. It's one of those uncomfortable emotions. But this is also a really important time to practice our own emotional intelligence and empathizing with our children when they're bored. Like, I know it doesn't feel good, instead of saying this is for your own good and I'm going to teaching you a lesson, right? It's really like, this is like a time to be understanding. Like, this is really uncomfortable. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've said to my daughter, I know this doesn't feel good. I wonder what you're going to come up with. And then and I said earlier, sometimes she's like, will you help me come up with something? And internally I'm going, because you're going to be like, no way. And then I go, and I start looking around, and it's part of that skill building, but that empathy piece is so important, because if we don't have empathy for them, they're going to be resentful and angry. They're not going to be learning how to sit with boredom.
Absolutely. We have a boredom jar in our house. So when we're not bored, we try to write on little pieces of paper all the fun things that we can think of, different games and crafts and things to do. And then, that's usually a good place to start. Even, I can go there and say, oh yeah, this cabinet needs to be cleaned out. I've been putting it off for a couple of months. I guess I'll do it now because I really am bored and I need something to do. But even if it's not exactly what's on the piece of paper, it's a starting place. Maybe the paper says, draw a map. My daughter's really into maps right now, so she loves to draw maps. And it might say, draw a map of Harry Potter world. And even if that's not exactly what she wants to do, she can be inspired to draw something else, or to, do something else that is sort of tangentially related to that idea. And it's been very effective for us, because it is hard to be the cruise ship director, right? And always be guiding people towards their next activity. It's nice to be self-reliant and just say, what am I going to do with my time? I have a little bit of time, or I have a lot of time. And also just, like Amy said, being able to sit with that discomfort is really important. Okay. So I know we could talk about this forever, but I have a couple of questions that I wanted to address. One question was from the group, which actually both questions are from the group on the Facebook page. So I wanted to address those, even though the parents aren't here to ask them. One was, at what age do kids really start to have mastery of emotional intelligence? And I think that really depends on a lot of factors, one of which is how early you start practicing emotional intelligence, and also how consistent you are in modeling and supporting emotional intelligence. And of course, it has a lot to do with temperament and with child development. We can't expect all 7-year-olds to have complete control over their emotions, but some 7-year-olds do. And I know lots of 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds who have incredible emotional intelligence because their parents are really on top of it, or they go to a school that is really focused on character development, and so they get those ideas reinforced a lot. So I think, it really has to do with how much effort is being put into their environment to practice those skills and to discuss them. But certainly, when we look at sort of just standard development, and we can expect kids to start to really utilize those skills between 6 and 7. Now, obviously, that's not going to be true across the board. Some kids are going to get that mastery a bit earlier, and some kids are going to be a bit later, just like anything else in development, right? There is no perfect window, but the more that we practice, the sooner that we're going to see those things in action. And even if our kid has high emotional intelligence and they have some mastery, it doesn't mean that we should stop practicing. It doesn't mean that we should stop modeling. And it certainly doesn't mean that we should expect them to have complete mastery in every situation. There are still going to be situations that challenge them. I mean, I'm 33 years old. There are still situations that challenge my emotional intelligence. And so, so we have to be understanding and patient with them and recognize that even if they do have some mastery of a skill, it doesn't mean that that's it, we're done now, and I should expect them to handle every situation with complete poise and composure. Sometimes they're really going to be overwhelmed or stressed out, and they're still going to need extra support. So it is important to remember that emotional and lifelong skill set, something that we continue to hone and build and practice over the course of our lives. Even for us as adults, who have pretty high emotional intelligence, we might have a friend or a family member or a partner who doesn't have high emotional intelligence, and that is an opportunity for us to continue to grow and learn and practice, because the more people that we can surround ourselves with to have that support, the better.
Yes.
Another question that I saw on the Facebook page right before we logged on to the webinar, a parent asked, does acknowledging my child's emotions actually encourage tantrums and outbursts? And it's such an important question because I think a lot of parents worry that if they do spend a lot of time talking about emotions and creating these safe spaces, that they're actually encouraging their children to be more emotional. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I don't think it's a problem to encourage people to be honest with themselves and honest with us and other people about their emotions. Just how Amy was talking earlier, that we can't ask our kids to feel something different. If they need to have a tantrum at that moment, that's what their body needs to do. Now, when they're not in that moment, we can work with them on some other ways to express their emotions, some other effective ways to manage their emotions, and we can practice with them. But it doesn't mean that they're never going to have a tantrum. And it also doesn't mean that every tantrum is the end of the world. We need to remember that sometimes we have outbursts. Even as adults, we have outbursts. And that we can really create that safe space and be supportive for our children's emotions, and not be afraid that we're going to make them too emotional or too sensitive, because however they are naturally releasing those emotions and expressing them is what they need to do at that moment. And then when they're calm, we can work with them and problem solve to figure out a variety of ways, or maybe some alternative ways that they can express those emotions.
I want to say something to that too, because I know sometimes when I can see my daughter is having a big feeling, her face gets squinched up and she sort of sticks her lip out, and it's cute and heartbreaking. And And I'll say, I can see, your face. I can see that your lip is puckering and you're really having some big experience going on. And she will then burst into tears. But it's not that I've acknowledged her feelings and so she's having more feelings. It's that I've created space for her to express those emotions. And what we don't want to do is say, you're having these emotions and I'm going to channel your emotions to here, because that's not going to help them. But what's going to help them is for them to have the space for these emotions, because they're already inside them. They're already there. And unless they can come out, if we make them bottle them up, they're going to eke out in their behavior throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, and even throughout their lives. But if we can create the space right here and right now for them to have 7 minutes or 12 minutes, or every once in a while, if we can handle it, as we grow in our own emotional intelligence, we're more able to handle them longer, to really create however long of space they need. And it's such a gift for them. And it's really a gift for ourselves too. So instead of it eking out here and there and here and there, it's this big space. That was a funny noise, but it's this big space. And then they're able to let go of the hurt and the pain and the behavior that they're trying to express it in. So I just want to say, yes, you might acknowledge it and that emotion might come piling out, but it's only because it was already there. It's not because you acknowledged it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. That's such a good point. And that's what I was trying to say, which you said so much more clearly when I was talking about earlier about just witnessing our child's emotion and, really being able to hold that space with them and, letting them know, I'm here with you for while you're experiencing that. I was going to say something and now, of course, I forgot my...
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault at all. It's just my pregnancy brain. Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to mention really quickly, and then I know you have to go. A lot of times when we're talking about emotional intelligence, what we're really talking about is active listening and reflective listening.
Yes.
And so, reflective listening is really sort of being able to read between the lines of what our children are verbally expressing. So, a child might come home from school and say, "I hate Mrs. Baker. She's the worst teacher I've ever had." And instead of focusing on the content of what they're saying, if we are able to read between the lines, we can actually notice the emotions that they are expressing with what they're saying, even if they're not saying, "I'm angry." And when we talk about active listening, we're really just a full participant in those emotional dialogues with our children, even our very young children, because that's really the best way to show respect and to be able to respond to them instead of just reacting to their behavior. So, one of the big things that we talk about when we deal with emotional intelligence is not taking our kids' emotions personally. And that's so hard.
Really is.
It's really hard, not just with our kids, with everybody, right? Yeah. You go, see a friend and they're sort of distant and quiet, and we internalize that and we say, wait, are they mad at me? What's wrong? Did I do something? Did I miss their birthday? What happened? And really it has nothing to do with us. They're having a hard time. Maybe they're stressed out. And, we tend to personalize so much of that stuff. So really not taking it personally is one of the biggest challenges, but also the biggest tools that we have in emotional intelligence. And the best advice that I could give parents to not take emotions personally is to separate the emotion from the action, right? Our child's behavior is not their emotion, even though it is expressing an emotion. So really being able to make that distinction, both in the moment and after the fact, and it's not easy, but it definitely is possible if we are able to really be self-aware and know our triggers and be willing to get out of our comfort zone a little bit and be willing to be uncomfortable ourselves, because that's really where the learning and the growing happens.
It's so true. We don't have any more questions. Do you want to add
Okay.
anything else? We're having a
Um,
tornado warning, so I'm thinking maybe we could get off.
yeah, that's a good
I
idea.
keep looking outside and I don't see anything, so I'm sorry. I'm a little bit distracted. I
That's so
just,
scary.
and I want to go get my child. So I'm
Yes,
going to
of course.
mention one thing.
Okay.
Tuesday, tomorrow, Hands in Hand Parenting is having a free parenting call, helping children with persistent behavior struggles. It's with Maya Coleman and Kathy Gordon. They're amazing. Their work is amazing. I can't recommend them enough. If you don't know how to sign up for it, you can go to parentingbeyondpunishment.com and click on the No Spink Challenge link, and the registration is there. Thursday, we're having our final workshop on positive discipline and everyday parenting. Sheena, I think you're going to be there.
I
I'm
will
so
be there.
excited. Your mic will be working.
Yes, exactly. We figured it out.
And we're really going to bring all the principles of positive discipline together, and we're going to really focus on everyday challenges. So bring us your challenges, post us your challenges, come join us, and I hope to see you in the webinar there. Sheena, you're so fantastic. Thank you for coming back to the room. I'm sorry that there was a glitch.
I'm sorry too. I don't know what happened, but I'm glad I figured it out.
I'm glad you did.
Perseverance.
Perseverance. It was awesome. So thank you so much for being here. Parents and grandparents and everybody, thank you so much for being here. Parenting is a challenge, and the more we can get together and learn together and grow our skills and support each other, the easier it is, for lack of a better way to say it. But it really does help. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sheena.
Thanks, Amy, so much. And thank you to everybody that joined us today.